As some of you know, this was the 15th summer in which I spent the first week of August with a group of 6 colleagues studying the assigned texts for the year ahead and talking about the task of preaching. We affectionately call this group Preacher Camp, and at the last retreat, we spent so much time marveling over the fact that 15 years has passed so quickly that we have not run out of things to talk about, ideas to share, thoughts to consider as each one of us looks every year out over the yawning abyss of 52 Sundays. And the challenge of trying to preach with a relevant, thoughtful, engaging approach that brings an ancient text to life. The assigned lectionary scripture readings run in 3-year cycles, A, B, and C. I never was great at math, but even I know that year 15 means that I have preached 5 times through the same 3-year cycle. For a preacher on her own, that's about all the relevant, thoughtful, and engaging approaches you've got. It's the conversation with the other colleagues struggling to do the same that makes getting up in our pulpits every single Sunday even possible. Which is why this week I've been thinking with some compassion about the Apostle Paul, or whomever wrote the biblical letter to the Ephesians, and his plight. He was the primary preacher of the first Christians. He was responsible for shaping their fledgling theology and practice in the ancient church. And he was writing letters in which he needed to illustrate that theology and encourage this extremely small, beleaguered group of new Christians. And he was locked in a Roman prison with no text, no colleagues, no real insight into what was going on right outside his walls. All he had was his parchment and his pen and his best guess about how Christian faith was faring out there in the world outside of those 4 walls. And he had a bunch of Roman soldiers making sure he didn't escape. So try to put yourself in this preacher's shoes, aware that his people need a word of comfort and encouragement as they, like he, are facing potential imprisonment, persecution, even death for their new faith. So he takes up his quill, chews on the end thoughtfully, tries to picture his people in his mind, and he notices the Roman soldier standing at attention in the corner of his cell. Aha, an idea. A metaphor that everyone, Jew, Gentile, could picture in her mind and immediately grasp the urgency of the message he was conveying. Put on the whole armor of God so that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. He chewed on his pen a little more and he thought some more. The belt of truth, the breastplate of righteousness, shoes to proclaim the gospel of peace, the shield of faith, the helmet of salvation, the sword of the Spirit. It was the perfect mental picture that everyone could understand. And those first Christians certainly understood what he was trying to say. This faith to which you have been called is serious business. It's a matter of life and death. Determining to live your life in the way of one who suffered and died on a cross because he made the powers around him so very angry is not safe or easy. As Christians, the writer of Ephesians is calling them to stand firm against the very powers of evil, powers that are real and pervasive and extending even beyond the obvious evil we see all around us. To translate that into modern parlance, dear church, what you do together is not an exercise in social climbing or club membership or even moral education for your children. Listen up. If there aren't places in your life where you feel like you have to stand firm against something bigger than you are, something is wrong. Our faith can emphatically never be passive. There are things that being a Christian means we are against. If you read the text carefully, you'll notice that the writer uses the word against in rapid succession, like a litany. Against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers, against the spiritual forces of evil in heavenly places. And what are we supposed to do against them? We stand. We stand up in the face of our fear and our feelings of powerlessness. We stand up against the forces of evil that threaten to tear not just at our own lives, but at the communities and the world around us. We stand firm knowing that God has already won in the end, that good will always overcome evil. So, in the meantime, he writes, prepare yourself appropriately so that you will be able to withstand whatever is coming at you. Sounds overwhelming, doesn't it? You might even begin to question what exactly you signed up for when you decided you wanted to join a church. But the writer of Ephesians wants to remind us, remember, finally, this is the whole point of being the church in the first place. Be strong in the Lord. Because the verb for be strong in the original Greek means not just an individual action, but a communal exercise, something we do together. The writer of this letter is not asking us to be strong for ourselves or by ourselves. We are also strengthened by the resolve of others who stand beside us and hold out a hand, some encouragement to get up every day again and again and again and face down the devil. This is the point. This is the point of being the church back then. It's the point of being the church now. And if these 7 weeks of reading this letter don't get us here, we've done something wrong. Dear church, what is the point? What is the point of knowing who we are? What is the point of knowing what we believe? What is the point of holding up standards of kindness and love and goodness in our community? What is the point of holding each other accountable? What is the point of being the church? This is the point. Finally, all of you together, be strong in the Lord. Put on the whole armor of God so that you will be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. That's the point. I have a very committed friend who is a very dear friend who's a committed pacifist. Let me say that again. I have a very dear friend who is a committed pacifist. She's also a committed friend. She would tell you that she learned to be a pacifist at the feet of her Baptist preacher father, but that the ideology became firmly ingrained in her psyche when she went away to college at a Quaker school. She is the kind of person who will always replace the word kingdom with the word kindom. And if you're ever around her and you use the phrase, kill 2 birds with 1 stone, she will quickly correct you. Feed 2 birds with 1 scone. I think she would take issue with these words from the letter to the Ephesians and perhaps with this preacher's interpretation. In fact, right about now, some of you might be coughing politely or looking around to see if anyone else is uncomfortable with all this militaristic language and the preacher talking about the devil and cosmic forces of evil. All right, I'll acknowledge it's very unusual to hear a message like this in the liberal pulpit of the Riverside Church in the city of New York. You know, sometimes we think we're so sophisticated, or at least we're too polite, to understand our faith within the framework of a cosmic battle. But I've got bad news. There's no other interpretation of this text that will convey the urgency of its message. In fact, I think it's difficult, if not impossible, to water these words down. And I bet you there are preachers out there doing homiletical aerobics to try to make this passage sound benign. I don't think it's possible to do that with any integrity. Not for the church then, not for the church now, especially in this moment in which we live. For our struggle is not against enemies of blood and flesh, but against rulers, against authorities, against the cosmic powers of this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Friends, a little let's all be nice to each other and call it a day is not going to cut it. And while pacifism might be okay, complacency is certainly not. We must, as one commentator writes, abandon a Christian naivete that fails to recognize the potent forces that bring destruction and division to our world and beyond. For some in our age, that will mean facing up to the fact that Christians have been far too easily sucked into the power games of destructive forces of politics and economics and more. It doesn't take long to assemble a list of these powers. You can do that just by opening the New York Times this morning. Gerrymandering right under our noses, a racist and unjust education system, laws unfairly targeting the LGBTQ community, the exploitation of the poor, the destruction of our earth, the cradle-to-prison pipeline, white supremacy in every structure we encounter, misogyny, and all the things women face, children in cages, politicians wielding power with arrogance and impunity, culture of toxic masculinity. Oh, don't even get me started. I could go on and on and on, and so could you. Listen to me, church. Listen to me. Our Christian opposition to these forces and others is not a difference of opinion from those who don't object, or worse, object but acquiesce. There are no gray areas here. There is no watering down the truth, and it would be irresponsible to do that. These systems and actions are pure, unadulterated evil. And if you and I come to church and say we want to be followers of Jesus Christ, we've got to stand up together to this evil and say no. On March 7th, 2017, the day after International Women's Day last year, a little bronze sculpture measuring 50 inches tall and weighing about 250 pounds was installed in Bowling Green, just downtown in the financial district. His fearless girl, she's called. She's standing, arms akimbo, chin raised in the sculptor's attempt to depict a young face looking brave and proud and strong. And she better be looking that way because she's standing installed just opposite Charging Bull, another bronze statue that measures 11 feet tall and weighs 7,100 pounds and depicts aggressive financial optimism and prosperity. The stark contrast between the two has caught the attention of the world, locals and tourists alike, since that very first day that they stood on the street together. Fearless Girl was installed, of course, to call to mind that there are only 18% of professionals in the financial services industry who are women, a gross inequity. But that little statue's come to mean so much more. Her stance facing the bull, her diminutive stature in the path of his power, the stronger representation that he embodies of so many structures and systems in our country and our world that feed systemic injustice and contribute to the suffering of so many, made her come to mind as I reread these words from Ephesians this week. Finally, be strong in the Lord. Put on the whole armor of God so that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. Stand like a fearless girl, because God has already won this battle. If you want, you can report over lunch today that the pastor of the Riverside Church preached about forces of evil and the wiles of the devil. And I will not mind one bit. Because there are some things in this world that must be called what they are, not wrong or inadequate or failing, but straight up evil. The first Christians, the first church, they knew what they were up against for sure, and it's time that you and I face the gravity of what we're up against too. Following Jesus means standing in the face of evil, powerful, dangerous, destructive forces beyond our full comprehension and certainly beyond our control. But here's the good news. You and I, we have everything we need to stand strong, all the armor of God, anything we could require. And here's the best news of all. We never stand there alone. Church, we have each other. And that is really the whole point. Amen.